What's up, everybody? We are live right now. Welcome back to another episode of the Illinois Green Party series. I'm your host, David Rych. We have Joshua Wright, creator of Eden's Last Chance, a documentary about what's going on around the globe concerning environmental degradation, pollution, tearing down, cutting down a forest, etc. And he's going to tell us about that, which is very cool. Josh, thanks for coming on the show. And Max Wilbert, who's a seasoned veteran here. He's probably my most reoccurring guest, honestly. So, Max, always a pleasure, sir. How are you?
Good to see you again, David.
All
And
right, so let's
Joshua.
get right into it. Josh, tell us. Let me get this off because I can only see half your face. Um, Tell us about like how you got into like what started the process of you doing this documentary.
Well, I grew up living overseas. My parents worked for the embassy, and
Oh,
at
that's
some
cool.
point when I was in high school, I started um, learning a lot about climate change and learning about what was happening to the ecosystems of the world, and realizing that everything I was being taught in high school was going to do me a whole lot of good. It wasn't going to do me a whole lot of good um, in the midst of a climate crisis. So I dropped out of high school in ninth grade, and I I wanted to do something. And for me, I at the time I wanted to make a documentary about climate change. And in the beginning of the film, it was sort of your typical documentary about why we need to transition to renewables and why we need to uh, do all the sort of more non-controversial things, not build pipelines, not build coal mines. And it turned into a documentary that was more about why we need to completely reform our civilization. Because in exploring the issue of climate change, I think as a teenager I realized that there is no separating ecocide and climate change. They're intertwined, and the problem isn't fossil fuels. The problem is our industrial civilization itself.
Hmm.
And that's like wholly consistent with Deep Green Resistance and Matt Max's organization. One of the reasons I was so attracted to it in the first place, because I think, and you're right. I mean, it's just I mean, one of the things I remember learning about what you just said, Joshua, when I was reading Lear and Derek's books, was that it's not just about fossil fuels. I mean, it was really because and they had the data. It was very well done. It wasn't like just arbitrary, whimsical nonsense. And I was like, wow, you're right. I mean, industrialization itself is like, in almost every possible way, devastating. Like it's just a resource monster. It's so just ugh. Um, okay, so I got to say, I was really impressed because you were 17 years old when you did this documentary. That's a massive feat for anybody. And, I mean, just that at such a young age, you had like the gumption and the gusto to go out and do that. I mean, because you were like all over the world. I know you were in Australia, you were up in Alaska. I mean, you were like doing lots of different areas. How was that? Were there any sort of like personal obstacles or challenges? Were you taken less seriously as a filmmaker or anything like that because you were 17, or did it go really well for you?
Well, I think it was a great introduction to radical activism for me. I think that's where I met Max, and that's the film for me was a bit of a. I dropped out of high school. I went to college for a couple semesters or a couple quarters, and then dropped out of that too. And I think for me it was a big learning arc, but I think that as a young person, a lot of activists who um, maybe are less kind of have their more or less so activists, but a lot of people who have their canned responses were a little bit more willing um, to do some self reflection, especially when it came to issues about like asking whether the environmental movement as it is now is actually winning or has won, and what that means for my generation. I think that provoked a lot of honesty in people, and I also think that in doing the filming it went from it it almost went through the like for me it was almost going through the five stages of grief where you first learn that you're in a way we're doomed, and you deny it, and you try to say, oh well, we can have renewables, or we can do these sort of side things and we'll be fine, to no, we are, if we really are as screwed as we are, then what do you do from there? I think a lot of films about climate change deny the underlying reality of the crisis that we're in. And sometimes they'll have a correct diagnosis in terms of saying, well, you know, all this industrial activity is killing the planet. Industrial agriculture, industrial fishing, industrial fossil fuels are all killing the planet. But then their solutions are, well, let's just do industrial lithium and industrial wind and industrial dams. And that it's like, I think that there's a misconception for people that climate change is the problem. And I think climate change it's almost like the earth is sick and climate change is its fever. And, you don't treat a fever by, just taking fever suppressants. Like that's not what's gonna, like, that's not the disease. The disease itself, the disease is our disconnection to the natural world. And, one of the things that I was worried about as a when making the documentary was, what if we did transition to a world run by renewables, and what would that look like if that actually did happen? And I realized it would look like would be a world pretty much the same as the world that we have today. It wouldn't be much different. We might have less carbon in the air theoretically, but we would still be committing ecocide on the natural world, and we would still be seeing ourselves as the um, lords and possessors of nature rather than as a species that is no better than any other species.
Right. Max, do you want to?
Yeah, I can't say it much better. And I was really inspired to meet Josh. It's, so many people are really excited by seeing young climate activists and environmental activists up and coming. And I'm excited too, but also it is kind of horrifying to me because it's just so reflective of how, I mean,
the urgency,
when you're 17, you should be like hanging out with your friends and having a good time and like figuring out who the hell you are and trying to be
right.
a grown-up. I'm not trying to say that this is bad, this path that you've gone down, Josh, but it's reflective of how to what extent adults in this culture and the culture as a whole have completely abdicated responsibility and basically just, can I swear on this show?
Sure.
Just completely shat the bed when it comes to all these issues. It's ridiculous. And so now we have young people like Greta going up there and sort of like excoriating all these world leaders for their terrible failures. And it's at one level it's profoundly sad to me because we all know what it actually is going to take to stop the destruction of the planet. We need to stop burning fossil fuels. We need to take down the dams. We need to stop industrial logging. We need to, dramatically scale back and stop industrial agriculture. So many of these things have been like Green Party pillars and understood by anti-globalization activists and peace activists and environmentalists for like decades. And yet we haven't been able to achieve any of it. And obviously there are systemic reasons for that, mainly revolving around, the violence by which the system that we live in is maintained, and the hegemony that is maintained by, the entire cultural apparatus from schools to films to advertising to, the entire religion, all the edifices of the culture that just reinforce these ideologies of consumerism and growth, and this is normal and everything's okay and just buy and be a normal consumer and be everyone wants a happy life, right? We all just want the white picket fence. And it's just an incredibly deep hole that we're in. So yeah, I think Josh you said it really well when you said, when people actually start to grapple with how fucked we are right now and how bad things are. Like, I always try and remind people, ecological collapse, climate collapse, the breakdown of the ecology of this planet, this isn't a future scenario. It's happening now, and it's been going on for hundreds of years. Like, we're deep into ecological collapse right now.
Right.
We're not at the beginning of it even. We're like deep into it.
Right.
And when we realize that, and when we start to give up on these sort of false fairy tale solutions, like the government's going to fix it for us, if we elect Obama, then he'll save us, the renewable energy tooth fairy is just going to wave a wand and everything will be okay. All of these fantasies that don't correspond with reality. It's only once we sort of get past those that we can actually start to have a real conversation about where the hell are we going to go from here? What the fuck are we going to do about this situation? Because it is grim, and only by accepting the truth and really appreciating where we're at can we chart any course forward.
Right. Also very well said. And Josh, I'm sorry, I can't. It's not, my computer's not letting me get to that thing to delete it off the screen, so I have to leave it on it. I don't know. It's not. I can't find it, so I don't know what happened. Sorry. Yeah, if you just move your camera, maybe I can see your face.
There you go.
There, that's perfect. Perfect. So okay, well, let's talk about the documentary itself. Like, how did you get like funding and the connections to do all this? Because again, you were everywhere.
Yeah, so a lot of it was like the whole thing was completely bootstrapped. There wasn't no one was funding it. It was like me and my dad and my uncle. So a lot of it was like a lot of the interviews we did were, I lived overseas, so a lot of these places were pretty easy to get to, because, in traveling abroad, I went up to Alaska a couple of times, and my parents helped out with that, but it was pretty bootstrapped. Like we were making a film with pretty much no resources, and my uncle works in cinematography and editing, so he kind of helped make that happen. But a lot of it was just learned while doing it. It took about 4 years, and I do not recommend doing it that way. It's way too much work, but it certainly is cheap. So yeah, I mean, I think what Max was saying about, what do we do if, like, in the context of us being screwed, I think that's like really the thing that I ended up focusing on with the film. And yeah, that I think is the central thing that a lot of activists have failed to ask, is like, okay, looking at it in the context of, all of the stuff that's happening. Because in the film we covered the Adani Carmichael coal mine, which is at the time was scheduled to be the biggest coal project in the southern hemisphere, and it would be opening up a coal basin, the only untapped coal basin on Earth, and it'd be building a rail link to this coal basin where there are another 10 mines planned. And while we filmed the film, they approved that mine and they're building it right now. So in the context of, if we are truly this screwed, there are a lot of people that feel like, oh, well, I'm going to cry and go home because this is too depressing. I don't want to watch this film. It's just, but I think that the thing that I wanted to figure out is, okay, how do we have a sustainable activism, and how do we have a chance at a future in that context? And what I think, one of the things that was said in the film was by the co-founder of Extinction Rebellion, who Roger Hallam, and what he said, I asked him what future he was fighting for, and like what that would look like, and would we be living in eco villages? Would we have solar? Like, what would it look like? And he kind of laughed at me and called me stupid, but he said, what the real question is, what does it mean to be human? And what does it mean to be human in a time when we're living in the midst of ecological collapse? It's sort of like, if you were about around your neighborhood, and a black van pulled up next to your neighbor's kids and they grabbed their kids, would you like just let that van go and just say, oh well, it's too depressing, it's somebody else's problem.
Yeah.
Nothing else I can do? Or would you chase the van, try to stop it, like do whatever you could to stop it?
Right,
And
exactly.
like any rational person, any decent person would obviously step up to in a situation like that. Like, I don't think you can doubt that your neighbor would do that. But in a situation when it's our entire planet, and it's the lives of literally tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people within our lifetime who are very likely to die from climate change. Like, there's supposed to be 600 million refugees simply from sea level rise by mid-century.
Yeah.
When it's a context like that, people are very comfortable being bystanders because it's just too insurmountable, and people feel like, as individuals, they don't have any knowledge or special right to do anything. And I think the most important message is, if not you, then who? Because trust me, nobody is coming to save you. And
Right.
one of the things I found, just my own activism, was, and right now, one of the things, I'm actually in the car because I just came back from a timber sale, and in Washington, they're logging 100-year-old forests, and this has been going on for a long time. And really, there hasn't been any opposition to it for about 40 years. because the old growth was all cut, and then these 100-year-old forests that were cut a long time ago, nobody was really paying attention to them or trying to save them. And that changed when just one guy who was like a retired BLM person started realizing that these forests existed and he wanted to save them. And I got involved with him, and we've been working on this. And in this activism, the legacy forest defense activism, we've been stopping timber sales every other month. So we've been stopping timber sales on a regular basis. And the only reason that those timber sales were going ahead was because people just weren't. They were like, oh, it's somebody else's problem. It's too big. It's too insurmountable. I can't possibly do anything. And it's like, in the context of 1 million species going extinct in the next several decades, maybe you can't do anything to stop that. But maybe you can do something to stop an individual species from going extinct. And if we have enough people doing that, 900,000 species going extinct is very different than 1 million species going extinct. And that difference, the shades of gray in the we're completely fucked are really, really important. And it's a cop out to say, if we're completely it's over, we're done, we're screwed, so I'm not going to do anything because it's too scary and I don't feel like I'm qualified. And it's like, yeah, it doesn't matter if you're not qualified. It doesn't matter. It matters that you see an injustice and you stand up to prevent it, in the same way that you do that if your neighbor's kids were getting kidnapped.
Right. You also have a lot of competing ideas of concerning solutions and cures to what's going on as well within, like, the overall environmental movement. A lot of people, I mean, the environmental movement for a long time, and now it's changing because of people like you two, and Lear and Derek, bringing out other information. But for a long time, they were advocating for electric cars and wind vines and that kind of thing, and like, so now they're getting what they wanted. But now we're realizing that that's not going to cut it. In fact, it might even be more dangerous than we had thought it was, because of the massive amount of resources depleted and environmental degradation used to build these things, and the sort of the economic and social injustices. And there's the lithium mines and the cobalt mines in like other countries where they're just destroying people's lands. Big corporations going, that's tragic, and a lot of people don't, oh, we got electric cars now, we got, well, how do you think the battery runs? Lithium and cobalt and stuff like that. And a lot of people don't know that. That's why I was so grateful to come across DGR, Lear, Keith, and Max, and to find out all this other stuff. It was really, really, switching to like biofuels. That's not a very good idea. That's just as dangerous to like agricultural practices and the depletion of nutrients in the soil as anything else would be. And it's so it's, you still got to cut down forests to grow the stuff to run the biofuels cells and so on. It's just it's a mess right now again, but the environmental and so the past again with the electric cars and the windmills and stuff like that. They're at the federal government level, and they're at the level of the IPCC, and so like they're the ones that are getting all the attention, and the other nuances that I just mentioned and stuff like that aren't being paid attention to enough at the higher level. The people that actually have the power, if you will, that's another part of this problem too, is the people that have the power. A lot of it has to do with like political hierarchies and stuff like that, and like corporate money and politics, and like the whole thing is just like this web of shit. So it's just really frustrating. Like, when you look at one area and go, oh, we can do this here, you see what it's tied to everything, all this other crap. And it seems very insurmountable, and I hope it's not, but I don't know. And even like the head of the IPCC just keeps coming out almost weekly saying, okay, he's like, I'm not kidding, man. It's bad. It's really, really bad. I'm not kidding. You got scientists like handcuffing themselves to doors and like kind of like, we told you. And the projections and the predictions are looking more and more bleak all the time. Excuse me. Yeah. So concern about your documentary though, like talk about some of the more like the specific, like I remember like I watched the documentary like a couple months ago when I first contacted you guys about this, or whatever it was, like it was close to that time. And we lost Max. Maybe he had to go. Bye, Max. See Alaska. Here he is. Can you talk about that? Because that's something that stuck out in my head. Is like they were like, again, going back to what I was just saying. Like they're supposed to be like this conservatory kind of organization and really there to protect the environment. And then they like turn around and like slapped everybody in the face. Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, so there's a new book out called Overstory, and it's by an activist down in the Redwoods, and they basically talk about how the Save the Redwoods League was set up by industry to enable industry to log all the redwoods. And that's not an angle of environmentalism people think about. And in the film, we went to Southeast Alaska, and when we went up there, it was really interesting because this was during the Trump administration, and everybody up in Alaska, or a lot of the NGOs, you asked them about timber sales, and they were like, "Oh, it's not that much. It's okay. It's that they almost were towing some of the party lines around these timber sales." And a lot of that we didn't include in the film, but one of the things that we did include in the film was um, this company called Sealaska. So in Southeast Alaska and in Alaska in general, um, there aren't any tribal governments. There are instead native corporations that were created under the 1971 Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act. And instead of giving tribes their own governments that they could, act as governments, they gave them corporations, which, and the boards of these corporations were largely made up of white people, and they were supposed to give money to people with Alaska Native ancestry. And what happened was the government gave these corporations land grants, and then they clear cut the hell out of these areas. And more recently, the company, one of the companies up there, Sealaska, went to the government and said, "Look, you didn't give us good land. We want better land." So they basically exchanged some of their cut over clear cuts back to the national forest in exchange for 60,000 acres of like prime forest that they selectively picked, in terms to have the best timber value. And what they did with that was essentially clear cut the living hell out of it. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, the the local environmental groups up there, many of them did not speak out against it. And in fact, because of the incentive structures of NGOs, and because of their, essentially being in bed with these companies, they essentially, signed off on the legislation and supported the legislation. And these are some of the worst clear cuts in the world. These clear cuts are over 5,000 acres going straight through streams and over mountaintops.
Oh,
And the fact that you have that anywhere you have environmental groups supporting that kind of logging is a testament to the failure of the environmental movement. Because by and large, if you look at if you look at the people that are on the board of companies like, or of organizations like the Nature Conservancy, even for the work that they do really good work in many cases, but their boards are, it's like this person worked for JP Morgan, this person, worked for, another investment company. Their boards are made up of the same people that are destroying the planet. So you'll have somebody on the board of one of these large NGOs, who works for a logging company who's, logged in Oregon. The biggest clear cut in Oregon is by JP Morgan, or a firm owned by JP Morgan, and it's about 40,000 acres. So you'll have the same people doing that, also serving on boards of these land trusts and these NGOs, because the companies have realized that it's just better to have their own people steering the environmental ship, as it were, and you just have essentially it's co-optation, and that's, I think, one of the biggest failures of the modern environmental movement. And now what you have on the Tongass is another 115,000 acres proposed to be privatized to these so-called native corporations. And the argument for these corporations, that they've weaponized identity politics, to say, well, this is land back, this is reparations. But in reality, they're also saying that they're planning on that they have not ruled out clear-cut logging all of these hundreds of thousands of acres, or over 100,000 acres of land that they plan on, that they want privatized. So it's like, you're not, these are corporations, but under the Biden administration, there's actually a real likelihood of this legislation passing. So you have, it's just complete corruption up and down. You'll often see in the environmental movement, you'll perceive that things are going well, but if you look behind the curtain, they're not. And I think that goes to some of the solutioneering happening with the Biden administration, where they say that the Inflation Reduction Act is the biggest climate legislation ever passed, and yet they approved the Willow Project, they approved the Mountain Valley Pipeline, and you quickly learn that the solutions that are being pushed for and the climate action that's being taken are all in the frame of renewable energy and subsidies for wind and solar and electric cars, but it does not involve stopping of any of the industrial projects that they have planned. So they're very happy to pass subsidies for new industry, but they are actively choosing not to scale down old industry. So instead of having a replacement of or like fossil renewables for all their faults, replacing fossil fuels, you're just having more renewables and more fossil fuels. It keeps everybody happy, except that
Right.
it's destroying the planet.
Right. No, that's really well said, because people need to know that. Like, it might even be like in the context of, environmental bills, the biggest one ever, but it doesn't. That if you look at what it says, I mean, it doesn't really do enough. It doesn't do what it should be doing, because politics are too interested in compromise and filling their wallets with cash. So it's not doing what it needs to do. Like you said, like it's not getting rid of the old stuff that needs to go away. And it's including too much of the new stuff that, again, is not as good of an idea as people think it is. So yeah,
I
very,
think
very
I
true.
think one of the crucial points is that right now all of the everything that all of the climate action that's being taken, it's always taking as an assumption the fact that we need more. We need more renewables. We need more of X or Y or Z, rather than realizing we don't need more of anything. We need less of almost everything, and that's
I
what'll
think
save
that
us.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think quantity of technology, c- products made, population. I mean, I think all this stuff is there's just too much of it. If there were only, like, 500 people on the planet, I guess using fossil fuels wouldn't be that big of a deal. Because it's
Yeah.
more of a lot of it is about scale. And but I mean, I don't know how you tell people, well, just stop having kids. I'm like, okay, it's like the most innate instinct that people have is to propagate. I don't know how many people are going to do that. I don't have any kids that I know of, but so I mean, I'm good there. And and a lot of my life is about, I give by not taking. I can literally fit every material thing I own in my truck. Like, I just don't own anything. I don't own property. I don't use anything. I'm very, very negligible carbon footprint, if you will. Um, and I wish more people would just choose to live a simple life like that. And um, it's a better thing. I got all my ideas from Henry David Thoreau. He's the one who kicked me off on all this stuff. I don't know if you ever read him, but
Yeah.
he's considered America's first environmentalist, because he was all about nature and simplicity and stuff like that. And he saw like a lot of the dangers coming. I mean, he talked about like the railroads back then, and like what they were doing to the forests,
Hmm.
and the smoke coming out of the stacks and everything else. And he talked about that stuff. He's very, very uh, prophetic in a lot of ways. And I recommend everybody to read him. Plus of his ideas in social justice and on civil liberty and that kind of thing, and protesting the government and so on. He was a cool dude. Yeah, it is, and it gets very frustrating because it is so overwhelming. And like I was talking to Max before the show, is that you do see a lot more people getting involved across the planet, which is nice. A lot more media exposure to a lot of the protests and activisms the activist activity going on, stuff, Greta Thunberg and stuff like that. Have you been able to connect with anybody, if you will, on that level of the activist movement, like a Greta Thunberg or anybody like that, or because of your documentary, has it gotten a notoriety at all?
Um, I've been I'm pretty focused on Cascadia, so I'm connected with pretty much everybody in the forest defense movement along the Pacific Northwest. On a global level, I think a lot of the forest issues that I work with, and that the film sort of focuses on, are largely ignored. Um, I think that a lot. So I would say probably no, actually. But in the context of the Pacific Northwest, I think it's I've been able to do a lot. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think chief among my like what I've been able to do with my activism is being involved with Fairy Creek, which um, is a protest against the logging of old growth forests in British Columbia. It started back in 2020 when right after I finished the film, and actually part of that was because of Max, and the blockade started in 2020, and it was essentially blocking access to an old growth forest up on top of a mountain at the headwaters of this last intact valley that was full of old growth forest with trees that are 2,000 years old. So, that blockade ended up becoming the largest act of civil disobedience in Canadian history, and over 1,200 people were arrested. So that's sort of where my energy's been for the past several years after, post filming the documentary. And I think now my activism is really focused on trying to get people mobilized to do that kind of activism and then just to materially, protect forests through whatever means. I think a lot of people who do direct action, look down on, public comments or whatever and lawsuits, but that can also be effective. And I think I kind of feel like what we really need in activism is we need everything, and we need militant activism. We need letter writing, because sometimes letter writing works, but most of the time, you need a lot more than that. But beyond that, I think, beyond the more defensive side of activism, I think it's really important to focus on the creating a real alternative, because the government's not going to do it for us. Companies are not going to do it for us. We ourselves have to create our own alternative communities, and that I think is what I've found is critical. And I think the film has definitely served as a conversation starter for a lot of people in terms of getting people to be interested in doing that. And yeah, the film's had a pretty good reception. We've taken it. I just was in University of California, Riverside, had a big screening there. Yeah, Queensland University has been screening it. And yeah, I think, if folks are watching this, we're not like, I'm an activist. I'm not like, there is no big company, pushing the film out to people, and it's not a particularly popular message, and it certainly doesn't fit in with the corporate message. So please help get it out there. It's, edenslastchance.com, and it's on, Amazon and, ironically, Apple and all those sites. So
Right. It is sort of like, I know I get called out on stuff like this, and you probably, I don't know, maybe, like using technology to fight technology. Like, well, we're in, and I've said this about like political and economic systems too. I mean, like, there's certain types of, there's certain aspects of our economic system that I think are really, really awful. But like, I'm sort of stuck in it. I don't really have a choice unless I want to go live on a mountaintop, which I would survive about a day. And the fight is here, and so it's just sometimes you just gotta kind of suck up, but you don't like and deal with it. But I mean, well, I'm glad it's getting a positive response, and that you're networking like that. That's great, and it'll probably just grow from there, which is good too. Do you have any plans to make another one, or any others? And if yes, like, what would it be about?
Well, so I don't have any plans to make another film at the moment, although I am working on one with the director of the film Rematriation, which is a film about Fairy Creek, actually. And I'm working on this film called Guardians, and it's actually going to be about some of about Thacker Pass and some of the stuff that Max has been doing there, and about
Great.
yeah, and about Fairy Creek. So I'm helping with that film, so I'm a producer, I suppose. So I'm not making it myself, which is so much easier, but it is something that I'm keen to work on. And I think that's going to be coming out in 2024.
Oh, cool. Right up. I think you froze a little bit there. Do you hear me?
And be called Guardians.
Mm-hmm.
And then personally, I think I'm working a lot on trying to create I'm trying to create an eco village. I think that's really important, and that's something that I want. I've. Oh, yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I just can't see you. Can you hear me?
Hello.
Hello. You
Can
there?
you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. You can't hear me? You there? Josh, can you hear me?
Can you hear me with
I can hear you. I just
my
can't.
camera off?
I can hear you. I can't see you. Yeah, I can hear you. Do you hear me?
Are you there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I can keep talking with no camera if that works better. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it seems to be okay. Your image is kind of frozen a bit, but I can hear you. Want to turn off your yeah? I want to turn off the visual, the video, and I can just listen to you. All right, can you hear me? Now I can't hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
Are you there?
Yep.
Okay, well, I forgot what I was saying, but
Uh,
yeah, I'll pass it back to you.
oh, doing the show, the movie The Guardian that's coming out next year.
Oh, right. Yeah, so yeah, that's my current project, and I definitely think that my current focus is on trying to save forests, because when I was working on the film, I kind of felt like I could be out there doing it, or I could be filming other people doing it. So my current work is actually trying to protect biodiversity directly. I'm not necessarily saying I won't be working on another film in the future, but for now, I'm helping out with the Guardians film, and I'm you know working on trying to stop the logging of legacy forests in Washington State, and hoping to end old growth logging in British Columbia and start an eco village. So that's my current focus of my work. I think I could make a million documentaries, but a documentary won't necessarily save a forest. But activism will.
Yeah, no, for sure, but that's very cool. But getting information out there is important for sure. Which documentaries do? Excuse me. Tell me more about the Eco Village. That's cool.
Well, yeah. So basically, there's not too much going on with it yet. But if you live in Northern California and want to be part of a back to land experiment, let me know. But the broader thing about the Eco Village is, um, right now, activists don't have an alternative to industrial society. So
Yes.
if you don't believe in car culture, if you don't believe in fossil fuels, if you don't believe in human supremacism or industrial agriculture, you really don't have an alternative right now. And that's one of the biggest problems that we face, is there isn't like a functioning alternative. And I think that we need to start creating alternative communities, because if we
Yeah.
don't, when faced with collapse, we won't have any ability to
Right.
survive on our own.
Right.
And there's the only real way I can see industrial society changing was if it had enough defectors that it just ceased to function. Because if they're part of the I guess the implicit threat of industrial society is, if you do not participate, then you'll go hungry, you won't have anywhere to live, you're going to get evicted. The entire state is very much set up, with a monopoly on violence, in such a way that if you want to opt out, you kind of can't, because you're going to be trespassing. You're going to like all of those impediments are there. And it's the enclosure of the commons, where there used to be common spaces where if you didn't like where you were living, you could just go off into the wilderness and live there instead. But today, you really don't have that. And I think that creating alternative communities, where if you don't want to be a part of a system that is destroying the planet, then you don't have to be. And you can, instead of going to college and getting some job somewhere, that you can go to an eco village and grow your own food and become an activist. I think that that's really valuable. And in terms of, as situations as the collapse continues to unfold, I think that things like that will become more and more important, and we will need networks of these lifeboat communities, where we essentially learn to live again, learn to be members of the living community again, because most people alive today just have never really lived, uh, in the bounds of the ecosystem that they're a part of. We're
Correct.
we're at best, we're heavily subsidized by industrialism, and at worst, we're completely dependent on it.
Yeah, 100%. No, I think that's a very, very cool idea. I've had similar notions before about, like, people really need to, like, kind of build their own cities, towns, or if you will, like, around these principles and these standards and methods of living. I'm certified in organic farming, and I have a certification in permaculture, and a lot of people don't know what that is, but it's a set of growing methods that, like, really uses the way nature grows things to grow food for ourselves. So it's very, very holistic, and it's very healthy, and it's very effective too. I I grow organic gardens for people all the time. So let me know when you get that village up. If you need a gardener, let me know.
For
Um,
sure.
yeah, I would. That's. I mean, that's. I did Renaissance fairs for a long time, and so you would actually live on the site itself, and it was just such a wonderful, simple. Again, like in nature, in a forest, with like just simple living and your friends all around you and sharing and everything. It was such a wonderful experience. That's very cool. I hope you persist in that, because that's a very, very cool idea. It's something that needs to expand to. I wonder how many other people are thinking the same thing. Like, oh wow, I wonder if I can build my own little eco village, and to see how to do it, and just somebody's got to start the ball rolling. You do it, other people are like, hey, I can do this too. But you're right. I mean, like all of the land in this country is owned by somebody, so like either private people or the government owns the rest, and you can you can camp in national forest for like 2 weeks at a time, but then you got to move. So it's not like you can just go find a spot in nature and go, I'm going to go ahead and take this, and I'm going to build an eco village. I mean, you can probably go really deep in the woods and never get caught, but technically or legally, if you do, you're screwed. But that's a very cool idea, man. I like that. And concerning the Guardian show film coming out next year, is that the one that's about Max mostly, or is that a different one? Now I'm forgetting.
So that's not about Max, but it's about Thacker Pass. So
Thacker Pass. Okay.
Yeah. So about Thacker Pass. It's also about Fairy Creek. So it has multiple components, but it's essentially about land defense. So it's a film.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, focused around land defense.
Gotcha. I gotcha. Yeah. No, Max does a lot of good too. I'm so grateful to know him. Because he's the real deal, as you are as well. It's very cool to know that that's happening. I was just gonna say something. I lost my train of thought. Okay. Anyway. All right. So we got a few more minutes left here. Currently, you're busy doing stuff. What can we expect to hear from you or see from you in like the very immediate future?
Well, so right now I'm working on a couple of tracks. So I've been working on documenting rare species in British Columbia with the hopes of building a case. Yeah, with hopes of building a case to protect old growth forests up there. So one of the species I've been working with is called old growth specklebelly lichen, and it grows in old growth forests, and currently there aren't any real protections for it. So the hope is to get more protections for it and to sort of build a case for getting some areas protected up there. I'm also working with the Legacy Forest Defense Coalition, and we are suing the Department of Natural Resources in Washington State, which auctions off these 100-year-old natural ecosystems every month, and trying to work to actually create a plan to protect somewhere around 100,000 acres of these forests on state lands in Washington. So that's where I'm really focusing my energy on right now. And yeah, that's my biggest. Those are my biggest things going on right now. And then in the long term, I definitely hope to break through to, like, I guess my generation on radical activism, because I think my generation feels very frozen and very disempowered. And yes. I think that by and large, people are avoiding the issue because it's scary. And then when they do actually confront the issue, they're being given this solutioneering, which is just completely useless. Like, this, unfortunately, like I don't have anything against anybody who's in the Sunrise Movement. I'm sure they're all wonderful people, but the Green New Deal is based off of industrialism, and it's going to keep on destroying the planet. It's like, is it better than what we're doing now? I mean, you could argue for that, but it's also, there's absolutely no guarantee. And right. Our issue is that we see ourselves as somehow better than the rest of life on Earth. And we if you Google human supremacism, you don't find articles about humans, like how humans think we're better than everybody else. You find articles about how humans are actually better than everybody else, and how humans are the most supreme creature and God's creation. And even if it's even in a more secular way, scientifically saying, oh well, we are the most superior organism because we can do X, Y, and Z. And it's like, we are measuring ourselves by our own metrics. So of course we are the best creature on Earth. But
it's rigged.
Yeah, I mean, it's like if you're if you're a jellyfish, like I'm sure the jellyfish think
You probably think you're the
jellyfish are the
the
best
top dog of the sea. Yeah.
on Earth. Like it's it's insane.
You're breaking up a little bit. I can't hear you.
Biggest issue. Live as if.
Yeah.
Oh, can you hear me now? Okay. Instead of like, as humanity, historically lived with indigenous relationships to the land, and every so often you would get civilizations that popped up here and there that that had a colonial relationship to the land, and usually those civilizations would burn themselves out in 100 or 200 years, or maybe more than that. But what we have now is that our civilization has completely gone global, and almost very few communities still have indigenous relationships to the land, and
Right.
like that's the fundamental issue. I think, as grim as the film might seem in terms of the assessment of our situation, one thing that I found as being very encouraging is that we are like my ancestors are a very mixed bag. Like some of them were horrible people. They were absolutely colonizers. They were they were absolutely participated in the worst aspects of colonialism, and yet I'm dedicating my life to protecting forests, and it's really encouraging to think that the children of the people who came to the Americas in this instance and settled the land and did horrible things to indigenous communities. It's really encouraging to think that the children of those people and the great grandchildren of those people are once again leaning towards indigeneity, and
Yeah.
the fact that humans innately, like to some degree, humans innately, like when you live in a place, if you can escape the cultural brainwashing, like we want to protect, we want to defend the land, we want to be connected to place, and that is a very encouraging thought. And I think that fostering that in our generation, which is the most disconnected generation in history, will yield really good results. And in a way, it's like I think our task right now is to build our army so that when civilization does fall apart, we can protect the wild places and I guess guide humanity's next chapter. Because right now, the people that are preparing for collapse are neo-Nazis in Idaho, and I don't think that their future is going to be very good.
No, that's not a positive outlook at all. But yeah, you're right, and army is probably the right word to use to describe that, because, like you said before, I mean, the militant aspect of environmental movement is an important one. It's happening. It's actually happening more and more. You're probably going to see a lot more of it. People they're just getting they're becoming afraid, and they're becoming frightened and angry. And when words stop working, then people go to other means to get their agenda accomplished. And it's not okay for anybody to destroy the environment. It's not yours to destroy. It's something that truly affects everybody, literally. So it's not like it's marginalized or anything like that. It's not an issue that you kind of like took offense at personally, like you chose to be offended. Like it's in your face and it's happening all over the place, and it needs to stop. It's ridiculous. The number one biggest polluting single entity in the world is the United States military.
Yeah.
It literally is, and it's just like, okay, well, what are you going to ask them nicely? I mean, it's ridiculous. So anyway, okay, so we're at about the end of it here. Anything last things you want to say before we sign off here? It was so great to have you on the show, Josh, and I hope we can stay in touch and have you on the future, because you're a wealth of information and activity, and glad to have people like you doing what you do. But any last things you'd like to say before we sign off?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm happy to come back on. If people want to keep up with my work, I'm on Instagram. My handle is Joshua Wright Film. And if you want to watch Eden's Last Chance, it's on Vimeo, Apple TV, Amazon. You can go to edenslastchance.com and see all the places where it is. And yeah, please spread the word about the film, because I'm not spending my time on film festivals. I'm spending my time out in the woods, and the way it's going to spread is ground up, and I hope it triggers conversations. And yeah, if you want to learn more about legacy forest defense work, you can go to WLFDC.org, and that's the organization I'm with right now, working to protect legacy forests in Washington State. You can Google the Fairy Creek blockade and learn about that. And I guess what I would say is, if you look around your own backyard and see what's happening, do something about it, because if not you, then who?
Right. And as a organic gardener and permaculturalist, I would say one big step, and it's rewarding in a multitude of other ways, is try growing your own food, at least as much as you can. I know that you can't probably, most people can't build a garden big enough to supply vegetables and fruits for themselves for an entire year, but do what you can. And it's just a rewarding practice, thing to do, activity. Growing food is wonderful. To see it, like, just to see something go from this big as the seed to like a huge tomato plant, and it's just unbelievable. It's magical.
Yeah.
And it's a really cool way to reconnect with nature, I think. I'm so glad I did that, got that certification. So I think that's a big part of it too. So and just go out and enjoy nature as much as you can, and just so you can remember how wonderful nature is and being in nature. Yeah, so that's what I would say. So okay, Joshua Wright, creator of Eden's Last Chance. Thank you again so much, Joshua. I appreciate you. Tip of my hat to you for all that you do and continue to do. And I will be in touch sooner than later. So everybody, thanks for tuning in to the Eleanor Green Party series. I'm your host, David Rych. Till next time, be good, be green. All right. All right,
Thanks for
where am
having
I?
me.
Yeah, I'm on a different. All right, Josh. Thanks so much, buddy.